Orgasmic enlightenment, where the sexual and spiritual come together. I'm Kim Anami, and I'm a holistic sex and relationship coach and a vaginal weightlifter. In this show, we explore all things intimate. I believe that our sexual energy is life force, creative energy, and we can use it to shape our worlds, strengthen our relationships, and self-actualize. I blend the most avant-garde information from neuroscience, ancient sexual practices like Tantra and Taoism, to renegade wellness modalities to show you how to create gourmet sex in your lives. Come one, come all. Radical unschooling. So over the next few weeks, I'm going to be doing a series of podcasts and interviews all around the theme of holistic pregnancy and childbirth and even postpartum. And in today's episode on radical unschooling, I am going to be diving into choices that you can make for early childhood education and beyond, all the way through. And we have an interview with Dana Martin, who is an expert in unschooling, in radical unschooling. And so she's going to give her perspective on her experiences with her own 4 children. And she teaches these things and guides people through them as well. So I thought this was especially apropos, as in these strange times, we are subject to all kinds of even more unusual ideas and programming. And programming Grand Central really is the school system, the public school system. And when I had my son, I had exposure to some alternative education ideas. I was thinking that I was going to put him into a Waldorf school. And then I instead was introduced to an unschooling school. So unschooling is opposite to a regular public school, where they teach you with a very set curriculum, which is brainwashing 101, really start them young and keep them going. Unschooling is about child-centered, child-directed learning. So your child and their interests really dictate how you facilitate their education. And so rather than a set curriculum of predetermined concepts and ideas and brainwashing, you really follow and allow your child to follow their own instinctual guidance of what their interests and their passions are. And as a parent, I was really of the mind that I was there to give a wide berth, B-E-R-T-H, and to facilitate the soul development of this being. And so rather than impose upon him, and sure, in some ways I did. I'm a very holistic person, so those kinds of ideas definitely were imposed upon him. But in many ways, with the intent to allow the unfolding of this being. And wherever I saw clues to things he was interested in, that I would pursue that and help him to pursue that. And without my ideas of things that he ought to be learning. Although, again, there were some, because I want to raise a free thinker. And he is a free thinker. He's 25 now, so I'm speaking more like from past experience, but so definitely there were ways that I would educate him in things like that, but ultimately want him to be able to choose. So the kind of education that he had was about child-directed curriculum. And that's what I believe creates creative individuals and allows them to think for themselves, to be autonomous, to be able to follow their own innate guidance. So rather than having external ideas imposed upon them about who they are and who they should be, they're really finding this from within, and they find the motivation for the things that they do from within. And so right now, I know a lot of people who are pulling their children out of the public school system, and even people who had children in alternative schools such as Waldorf are also pulling their kids and deciding now to homeschool them or unschool them. And because they are now going to be subject to certain measures that enforce you've heard my other podcast episodes on the truth virus and I've gone viral and the new normal. a new paradigm that many of us are choosing to opt out of and have opted out of, perhaps I would say for my entire adult life. And for those of you who have young children, this is information for you to consider in terms of those decisions. If you're feeling lost or unsure or, open to new possibilities of how your child might receive an even better, more tailored, custom, bring out their own innate genius kind of education, then this is for you. Today, we have with us Dana Martin. She is the author of Radical Unschooling and Raising Rebels. She is an author, a speaker, and an educator. She travels all over the world teaching people how to radically unschool their children. And she has been featured on The Dr. Phil Show, CNN, Nightline, 60 Minutes, The Discovery Channel, and The Today Show. Welcome, Dana. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's kick it off with a definition of what is unschooling. And then as you talk about it, I'd like you to also key into these quotes from John Taylor Gatto, as are these really the basis of unschooling. So when you take the free will out of education, it becomes schooling. And then this one, the truth is that schools don't really teach anything except how to obey orders.
Oh, yeah. John Taylor Gatto was such an inspiration to me for the last 20 years. And yeah, those quotes are quite true. And I think that John had a wonderful way of conveying in a really basic way that many of us could feel relieved to hear his words, because many of us felt this growing up.
Yeah.
And we didn't have anyone to support us. And that's what I got from John Taylor Gatto early on in my career, was just that comfort and that validation that you were right the whole time. Yes, your instinct was right. You being an obedient individual is the goal. So unschooling, yes, unschooling is, it's been such a journey for me in 20 years. And unschooling is a form of homeschooling. I'm sure a lot of people have maybe heard the term now that everything's happened with COVID and people are just hearing about homeschooling in general. Unschooling is the idea that schools, with the institutionalized aspect of schools with forced learning, are really damaging. And so some people hear the term unschooling and they think uneducating, or being neglectful and not doing anything. I think that's what most people think it is, but what it is not doing school. It's not learning, and it's not unparenting. It's not forcing your child to learn things against their will, following a curriculum that every other person the same age should follow, according to to that belief system. And to me, it's unbrainwashing yourself of seeing things through the lenses of school. So that's basically it in a nutshell.
Right, because I remember growing up and loving learning, right? But starting to realize I didn't like school and that there was a difference for me. I was passionate about learning and throwing myself into things, but I really didn't like the format of school and grew to like it less and less. And so most people are aware of alternative options such as homeschooling or Montessori or Waldorf education, which all have some great merits, but unschooling is a very different philosophy, even from homeschooling, which people typically associate it with. So can you describe your journey to radical unschooling, which is what you've called it? And did you ever have an example of anything like this growing up? Or you've mentioned John Taylor Gatto, sounds like he was an inspiration for you. And what kind of tweaked you to go out into that direction? So it sounds like you probably had some, like me, some internal nudges that things weren't maybe the best in the current education system and there could be other options. And then which of your children did you start this lifestyle with?
Okay. I love chatting about this, and it's funny, I never get sick of it. I've been educating other people about unschooling for almost 20 years now, and there's never a time where I get tired of sharing about freedom for children. So I'll start off by sharing I have 4 kids. I have 2 boys and 2 girls. I have a son, Devin, who's 21, He's actually getting married next week to an
Whoa.
yes, I know, my first child. I can't believe it. He started everything for me basically, but he's getting married to an unschooled girl whose mother found me many, many years ago when she was in third grade, and she was having a very hard time in school, and she found me online, and I supported her, and she took her daughter out of school and came to know unschooling. And so it's this really sweet story of the two of them meeting at a conference that I organized and becoming friends and falling in love, and they've been together ever since. So
Beautiful. I love it.
yeah, my son Devin. I have a daughter, Tiffany. Her real name is Dakota, but she prefers to be called Tiffany, and she's going to wait to legally change it. She's 18, and she's an aspiring model and performer and singer, and she has a YouTube channel. So like kind of all the influencer stuff. She's an influencer, like a professional one, which is mind blowing to me because I knew nothing about it until she started really getting into it. I have a daughter, Ivy, who's 15. She runs an animal rescue, and she's a totally into death metal and heavy metal, which is so wonderful for me because I am too. I always was. And so she and I go to concerts together. And then I have a son, Orion, who's 12. So I never imagined living a life like this. I never imagined who I would be as a parent, actually. I just knew that I wanted to give my children the things I didn't have. And I wanted to do better than the generations before me. So when my son Devin was born, I had him in a hospital, and I had a midwife, which is really radical. 21 years, 22 years ago. Wow, I just can't even believe it's been 20 years. And it was a wonderful experience. I had a natural birth, which I didn't even know I was capable of. But once I went through that, I realized that there's so much that I needed to tell women about birth, because all I had heard was fear-based things, that women compete with each other based on how much they suffered. That's all I heard. My labor was 18 hours, and it was this competition of suffering. And nobody tried to make me feel like ready for it in a good way. It was just all, when are you going to get your epidural? And I just knew I wanted to do something different. I know, isn't that crazy?
Yeah. I call it the normalization of dysfunction, right? Like people, these things just become so, we become so numbed to these things that we start, it's like kind of a Stockholm syndrome, right? That it's like, oh, now people begging to have these things done to them that are really quite horrific. Yeah.
I never heard it put that way, but that is so beautiful and so true. Yeah. Well, when I had Devin, he was put in my arms for the first time, and I couldn't believe I did it. I actually have like an audio recording that's a really bad recording, and all I kept saying was, I did it. I can't believe I did it, over and over. Wow. And the way his like warm, wet head felt on my arm, when I close my eyes and I think hard enough, I can still feel it. Like that's how much of an amazing experience it was for me. However, probably maybe an hour or two after he was born, I was nursing him for the first time, and the nurses were kind of yelling in the hallway, and they ran into my room because there was nobody else in the birthing center, and the TV was in my room, and they turned it on, and the Columbine shootings were happening live, which I'll tell you, we're kind of used to hearing about school shootings now, aren't we? But back then, 21 years ago, it was the first. And I remember, like, I couldn't believe it. For one, that they put it on in my room, but I couldn't look away. Everybody was gathered, and I'm holding my baby, and I'm seeing
no consciousness,
students jumping out of windows.
Well, no consciousness at all that you've just had a baby. You're in this delicate, bonding, maternal infant space, oxytocin flooded, and they're going to come in and bombard you with the most horrific violence imaginable. Like,
it was
what
crazy.
kind of level of consciousness is that?
Yes. And at the time, I was in such a relief state that I had done it.
Yeah.
The placenta was delivered, and I was breastfeeding, and it was just like finally resting, and so, but it was like a national emergency, it was a really big deal when it happened, and I could hear people, oh my God, what's going on? And so for some reason, this was all meant to be in some way for my purpose. Just the way everything lined up when I look back. I remember thinking to myself for the very first time, how many of those parents that are there and looking up at their children in that school crying, like how many of those parents would have rather their children be home that day, but didn't know they could keep them home, didn't know that there were options. And, how many of those kids would have rather been doing what they wanted with their time, and so I started thinking about how unjust it was that parents and children are separated when they want to be together, and how the institution of school puts their needs before the family. That you have to ask permission to have your child out of school. That is not freedom. I mean, when you have a child in school, if you have to call somebody and say, may I have my child? We're going on vacation. Wow, people don't realize how unfree they are in that dynamic. So it just really got me thinking. And I thought to myself, my children will always have the choice to choose school or not. So it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm petrified, I'm never sending my child. It was more of about children's rights. I hadn't really thought about it in such a way so powerfully before. And so it all began there for me, everything. It was just like the cosmos opened, or there was just this amazing thing that happened within me. And I just knew, like, this is my purpose. Like, I'm meant to help people see that children should have rights with how they spend their time, and parents shouldn't be afraid to spend time with their kids. So yes, that's where the journey began.
And so with your first child, did you just start out with not sending him to school?
Great question. So when he was maybe 7 months old, well, let me just rewind a little bit. And there's so many stories I want to share with you, Kim, so many, and having to pick the ones just to get it into one interview. I think I'm going to fly out to you and we can just have a girls' night, and we could chat for hours, but for the sake of the interview length. So when I brought Devin home from the hospital, I remember walking in the house and my mother-in-law was there, and she pointed to a bassinet and she said, make sure you put him in that and don't hold him too much, because he will expect it. He'll expect it. And I remember I know. And I remember going, okay, I was still a people pleaser. I hadn't morphed yet into this strong, powerful, fiercely protective mother and being that I am now. At the time, I was so desperate to be accepted and loved, because I was so conditioned to only love myself when others say, would love me or approve of me. So I remember going, okay, thank you. Yeah, okay, good to know. And she left, and I remember looking at my son and just kind of putting him in it, and then just kind of walking away, sitting on the couch. And I'm on the couch, postpartum, breasts leaking with milk, and my son's all the way across the room. And I remember seeing him going, what the fuck is that? What the hell? Why would, and I just like got up and I took him. I'm like, how does that make sense? Like, why would anybody think this little cute being was going to take advantage, and don't love him too much because he'll expect it? That's when another like shift took place, that, wow, like, I do not think like most people. Something, I cannot even get close to agreeing with that. And that's when a lot of trouble began for me, as far as with my ex-husband's family. They really were upset that I didn't follow their advice, and this terrible experience happened. However, them pushing me out because of my choices, if it wasn't for that, I don't know, if I'd be where I am today, because I had to grow confidence and self-love. And I chose my son first over being loved and accepted. And that was a first for me. And I realized I didn't die when I did it, so afraid for so long. And so then my research began. And my son never slept in a crib.
Let me just stop for a second, because
Yeah.
I want to acknowledge that.
Please.
Like, that is so powerful. And I think that is such the difference between what you're saying and the average person who gets sucked into that dynamic of people pleasing and just not ruffling the water. Oh, it's easier to just do that. Like, I've heard people talk about major life decisions with their children where they just kind of forfeited that to not create conflict, right? So the fact that you were, and I also think that your connection to your son and having a natural birth, where that bonding process, and I know as a natural doula, you would agree with this, I'm sure, that this is like, that connection that's forged is so integral going forward to having that bond, having that desire innately to know what's right for us and our children and to protect them, right? Where I think that so much of the industrialized hospital birth setting interrupts that. And, some might even say by design, right? But to have a natural birth keeps all of that intact. And so for you to just have that knowing, right? No, this is what is actually right. This is actually wrong. And to very clearly reject it, I think is even a process and the gift of having a natural birth experience where the woman becomes reborn. And within that journey of giving birth, she then the part of that reward and that gift is strengthening her own innate knowing, right? Like, how do we know how to parent? Well, it's an instinct. A lot of parenting, if we can tune into that natural flow and instinct, it's there. But most people have that cut off.
Mhm. Yes, I'm so glad that I'm on your show with you right now, because it's so rare that I meet somebody that really just gets it. And it feels so good, doesn't it, when you're surrounded by other women who understand and they agree, because our society is such an fear-based place right now, especially. Um, and people don't know whether to fear the hospital right now, mainstream thinkers, or to fear home birth, or to fear that nobody knows what to fear. There's just fear everywhere. But yeah, I agree. I do think that it's designed that way. I don't think that nurses necessarily, there's well-intentioned nurses and doctors, I understand, that love their jobs. And I don't think it's this evil as far as nurses are concerned. I don't think it's really made aware so much, but it is designed that mothers and babies are separated. And what happens is, if it all starts with birth, and when you give birth in a hospital, you're choosing to have a medicalized birth. If you want a natural birth, you would never birth in a hospital, but people don't really understand it, because they put these signs in the hospital room saying a birthing center. They put quilts on the bed, and they try to make it seem like it's this birthing center and they're naturally minded, but truly it's a business and they want money. Mm-hmm. And they will do what's convenient. They will do things so they don't get sued, liability. The mother and baby are never put first. And so when a woman isn't able to have a natural birth, or birth the way nature intended, she loses the ability to trust herself. For example, oh, your baby's too big. You've been pushing for 2 hours. It's just not going to work. Your pelvis is too small. Your body's broken, essentially, and we need to save you. The body didn't do it right. And so it starts there, the woman's rescued from an expert, and then says, thank you, I couldn't have done it without you. Oh my goodness, tell me what to do next.
Right.
But it's really like that. And it's like goosebumpy when you think about it, because I always want to be if I could be with every woman on this planet, that's in these kinds of societies, I would love to be able to help support them, because it's in these moments that the entire trajectory of your entire life and your child's entire life begins. And how a baby comes into this world, if a mother is trusted and believed. I've been with women who have pushed for 3, 4, 5 hours even, and that's all within the range of normal. But if you're in a hospital and you push for more than 2 hours, there is a pushing time limit. Mm-hmm. You will not be allowed to push longer, and they're not going to tell you your time is up. They're going to tell you your pelvis is too small. And if you don't have a doula or somebody there with you, you think that you failed. My body doesn't work, and I can't breastfeed either, I'm sure. And so then you're turning to experts and other people with every aspect of your child's life, healthcare, school. You think, I couldn't even birth my baby, never mind educating him. It's your whole life that goes down that path. So I know people say all the time, oh, what's so great about a natural birth? It's not just about everything. It's not just about this wonderful experience that it is. It's about your entire life course. Is kind of set in then. So
yeah, I agree. Yeah. And yeah, great to hear it further reinforced, because that's why I wanted to touch on that as even being connected to this path of being able to self-educate and choose a different way of bringing knowledge and innate wisdom to our children. So let's direct it back to the whole unschooling idea. So when people, I would say the average perspective on that might be viewing unschooling and the lifestyle of it as being lazy, or that you just let your kids run around all day and you have no control. However, I would say that it's fair to say that modern parenting is actually much more lazy and unconscious, largely by design, because adults are so tapped out. So what you were talking about with the unschooling path requires a ton of engagement and energy and emotional intelligence to understand your child's behavior and nurture their interests. So can you help to reframe how the unschooling lifestyle isn't just lazy parenting, and how the success and the prosperity of the child is actually at the center of all of it?
Yeah, certainly. I'll first just differentiate between unschooling and radical unschooling for some people. So unschooling, the term that most people know, is a whole life philosophy. Unschooling is trusting your child with their education. So it's this level of trust and freedom in education in your child's life, and facilitating your child's interest based on what they love and bringing resources into their lives to learn and grow from. The learning and educational side of unschooling, I think most people really can get behind. You know, it's schools are kind of caveman learning now with all that's available. And people are very, really up on that. However, radical unschooling is extending that trust that you have for your child's learning into every area of their life. So now this is where parents are like, whoa, what are you talking about? But stay with me. So it's trusting your child with their innate ability to want to do what's best for themselves, their ability and their desire and their birthright of freedom, you know, is really important. And also trusting your child and being a guide in their life and a leader and a supporter, and, you know, whatever role that you're leading, but you're not coming at it from the traditional authoritarian paradigm. So 99% of parenting books on the market and information from experts that are given is all based on behavior modification and the parents' needs solely. The parents' needs for quiet, uninterrupted sleep, and obedience and compliance. That's the goal of parenting, advice. It is. I mean, if you see it, some of the nanny shows, I mean, yeah. Did you want to comment
Well,
on
just
that?
when you
Are you
said
feeling
those
it?
words, yeah, obedience and compliance, it just makes me think of that this is internalized messaging, right? That fits a whole culture where you're trying to create good, obedient worker bees, right? And so for parents to
Yeah.
internalize those ideas that, oh no, the real goal with parenting is to establish my dominance and to show them who's boss. And like the same kind of imprinting that you mentioned with your mother-in-law of like, no, you can't love them too much, you'll spoil them, there's no
Mhm.
way that you could, acknowledge them that way. So it just, occurred to me as you said those words that it's part of this whole paradigm of creating that power dynamic, right? As like
Mhm.
adults, you must listen, children, you must listen to me, my word is law.
Yes, yes, exactly. And parents are trained to train their children. Parents
Yeah.
are trained to train their children. And so if you were on a deserted island with your child and you gave birth, you would never parent the way people do, or they're told to in our culture. You would do exactly what we're promoting. I mean, which is just listening and honoring your child. Um, so the difference is the authoritarian paradigm is where the power rules and your only job is to train your child like a dog to take orders. Yes, parents love their kids and many of them don't want to be doing that, but they don't know how, what to do instead. And their lives are really miserable. I mean, if you're controlling another human being all day, every day, it's not a fun existence because it's not natural and it's not what you're supposed to be doing by nature. So it's a really painful, miserable existence. And when a parent is told to control their child and focus on behavior modification, it's never taking care of the child's need at all. It's just the parent's need. It's extremely narcissistic to parent like that. It is. And people are saying, like, what's happening to our society is narcissism everywhere. Well, you're modeling narcissism by forcing a child to meet your needs by only caring that he does what you say, never looking at him as a human being and giving him that same respect that he deserves. So a partnership-based paradigm, which is what I'm sharing and suggesting and educating people about, is about focusing on the needs of everybody in the family equally, the needs of the parent and the needs of the child. The child's needs are just as important. And as funny as it sounds, like people are so kind of awakened and moved by that. But when you really think about it, it's crazy that would be so groundbreaking and new and radical to care about a child's needs. But when you really break it down and you explain it to people, so I don't focus on my children's behavior. That's not how I did things. However, when I would see whatever, I would focus on the needs under the behavior, because behavior is just, it changes, it evolves from, a baby, a toddler, all the way up through the younger years into being a teen, an adult. And when you focus on a child's needs under the behavior changes. Now, that's not the goal of it, but it's a side effect of respect. Most of the time, behavior in a child just gets worse and worse and worse because, for one, punishments don't work. And for two, it's excruciatingly frustrating to want to have your needs met and having somebody only focus on how you're asking. So I'll give you an example. Have you ever been in a situation, Kim, where you were trying to explain something, but you were really upset about something, and you're just like, oh my God, I can't believe this has happened. Oh my God, like I can't even. And what if your best friend said, Kim, I don't like how you're saying this now. Start over. No, you go until you can talk to me politely. No, I don't want to hear it. No, you get over there. I mean, like, think about how disrespectful that is to another human being. And the whole time you're going, why do you care about how I'm saying it? I can't help it. I'm upset. I'm a human. I have emotion. Like, but kids can't articulate any of that. And they suffer so much in the space of nobody caring at all why they're upset. And instead, they're just not obeying. And so then you see all these side effects come up, stuttering and nail biting. And oh my goodness, the many things that plague our society. I really do feel like it's really damaging, to not focus on that. So, yeah.
So is this so like in the context of radical unschooling is really listening to our children and giving them space to express themselves without trying to even limit how they express themselves or direct that. And I think I've heard you talk about this before. It's like, imagine if you, like you talk to your adult friends that way. You would never talk to your adult friends like that. And
Never.
so if we apply that to how we speak to our children, how would that look different? And the only reason it looks different is we're told that, we're instructed that this is how we need to kind of corral or shape children in a certain way. So, which I really appreciate you talking about that. So in the realm of, okay, like back into the whole unschooling dynamic or educating kids dynamic. So my understanding of non-coercive education and unschooling is that you watch for what the children are interested in and you try to really nurture that, right? So if a child is really interested in plants and gardening, like you really do as much as you can to facilitate those things and create space and support those choices as much as possible. So how does that, like if you were to say unschooling with your like 5-year-old versus unschooling with your 15-year-old, and does that resemble in any way what people think of as any kind of structure? When people ask, well, how do your kids learn to read? Like, how does that, if you were to kind of explain to people, like, how do your kids learn and what is a typical unschooling day, which I'm sure you'll say is just any day of your life, right? There's no real division between unschooling and our lives, but to try to help people make that bridge and understanding it, say 5-year-old's day, 15-year-old's day, and then how do they learn things that we would deem as being at least somewhat essential, right? Some people would think like the ability to read, or say basic math skills, where I'm sure a lot of people would argue that algebra isn't really an essential life skill, but so be it. So how would you frame all of that stuff?
Okay. Well, reading and writing and math are all tools to help us get what we want in life, right? I mean, that's all they are. They're tools to help us figure things out and get more of what we want and accomplish our goals. And what human being wouldn't want to learn these tools unless they were forced? When these things are forced and coerced, no matter how gently, a child is very difficult to learn because there's no context. And the whole idea of learning as you go, when you need the tool, as my children have needed the tools, they've learned them so like easily and picked them up. So I live life like that all the time. I think most of us do, is that, as you need to learn something, you figure it out. And so that's the whole idea actually of unschooling is supporting that. And when a human being has the desire for their own life's path to learn certain things, they learn it, and they learn it easily, and there's no damage to the relationship with force and coercion. So a typical day would look so different in everybody's home, like different people's homes. It depends on the child, it's so hard to say. My daughter Ivy, it's funny because 2 out of my 4 kids they were always really like they loved book learning kind of stuff. So I think they always really impressed people. But then my other 2 kids who are more techie, my son Orion, he loves gaming, he's a gamer, and my daughter Tiffany, who's does videos, YouTube, Instagram, that's not so impressive to people. However, I'll tell you, out of all 4 of my kids, they're all learning just as much as one another, but it's perfectly catered to who they are as an individual. And the ones that are learning in more of a book fashion, although most people really value that much more than technology. They're all doing well, and my son Devin. Yeah, so let me rewind a little bit, because different ages do different things based on what they love. So when my son Devin was like 5, I can remember he was like, for example, he was really into Legos for a while. And whatever my kids are interested in at the time, it's the nucleus of their learning. That's how I look at it. The nucleus of their learning will branch off and outward based on this one passion or interest. And so we don't break life down to subjects. That's one aspect of unschooling, that the whole idea of subjects is school think. It's conditioned ideas of only valuing these certain things in life because schools say this is what you really need to know, and you don't need to know any of the other millions of things that are important. So we never broke life down to the subjects. However, if I was to, just for the sake of explaining to everybody, so children learn when they're internally motivated. And when they're interested in something and they're passionate about it, that internal motivation is just there. It's just so always going. And so I facilitated Devin's learning based on his interest in Legos by subscribing to Lego magazine for him, because I knew he was interested. He loves them. I knew he'd want to flip through the pages, and I got him books about Legos. We did different, websites. I think it was before Roblox. Roblox is like a big deal in Minecraft, but it was before then. He played computer games based on Lego. We baked a cake that was shaped like Legos, and he used math. So the magazines, the books were English, and math would be the cake making. Or we went to see exhibits and we saw true human potential, which is so important to me as a mother. I want my kids to see true human potential in every aspect of humanity. And so to see this enormous Lego exhibit, or we went to Orlando and Disney, and they had the Lego exhibits in downtown Disney, which were the most awe-inspiring things I've ever seen. Like, I didn't even know a human could do that. So I want my kids to see true human potential in every form. So yeah, that's just an idea. He learned so much based on this one, interest of Legos at this time in his life.
Right.
So much learning happened because I used it and I facilitated with all different, avenues. So that's one way to describe how it's done.
So rather than and again, to try to explain this to people who might be so unfamiliar with these ideas, rather than sitting down to learn math and learn reading. So let's say he's doing Lego, right? So he's got this passion about Lego. The Lego kit comes with instructions, right? And if maybe he can do the kit without the instructions, but if he needs to use the instructions, he's going to have to learn to read. So right there is the intrinsic motivation for learning to read, because he won't be able to build the Lego set. Let's say, if he had to use them, right? And so my understanding of unschooling is that then, like you're saying, this core interest, like say with your son was Lego, then will allow and facilitate the learning of all the other things that are necessity. And so to get to where they want to go by their own internal motivation, rather than sitting them down and working on something that is then segregated from all other applications in life.
Yes.
This is a way to motivate people. And with my son went to a school, but it was a very, very unschooling school. And so all the learning was child directed. And so they have these great stories of how one of the students was maybe age 10 and wanted to be in the school play. A bunch of the kids wrote their own script and were putting on their own play. And she wanted to be in it, but she didn't know how to read. So overnight, she taught herself to read so she could learn the script to be in the play. Right? So the things, even the time that people say, oh, you need this many years of math or this many years to learn how to do this, is also completely invented and arbitrary and really dumbs people down. Like John Taylor Gatto talked about that a lot, that school, more than bringing out somebody's innate intelligence, is actually dumbing people down. And so these stories of, very high speed learning, especially when intrinsically motivated, is more the truth of how children learn and grow, rather than, again, these more, you have to be up until age 12 until you really learn how to, algebra or something. And again, one of the teachers at this school he went to could teach everything up to, sort of grade grade, whatever, age 12 math within like 20 hours, if they wanted it,
Yes.
if they wanted to get there. And so and I think this is a huge mental thing for people to wrap their heads around. It's a bit like the idea of childbirth, right? For people who are
Right.
so fearful that if they don't have a birth in the hospital, all of these things will go wrong. And I think the same parallel would apply for most people with school. If you don't go to a typical public school and learn things in the way that you're being told, there's really no other way, right? And it would be dangerous and scary and all the consequences. Where the truth, though, is that stepping out of those systems are so completely actually closer to how we as humans can amplify our true superpowers.
Beautiful. Yes. And I think that most people haven't seen natural learning. So it's so foreign to them that they get worried. We're conditioned to believe that children should have this extreme variety throughout the day of all these different like subjects or things to do. And they have an hour of this, and an hour of this, and an hour of this. And, they get so frustrated when their children want to just do one thing all day or for days or weeks or even months. They think that something's wrong with that because they're not used to seeing how normal and how wonderful that is. Humans learn in big chunks of time. Think of the things that you have loved learning, Kim, over the course of your lifetime. And if you're anything like me, when I'm into something new that I've just learned about, that's all I want to do. So I do my responsibilities, but then any spare time, I would be uncomfortable sitting on the floor for hours and hours just to learn about it. And I think we need to bring people back to the realization that this is how human beings learn. So a lot of what I do, like with parenting coaching, is parents being nervous about these kind of things. Oh, my child's only wanted to do this for days and weeks. When will they just start picking up all these different things? And I'm like, well, it's not really like that. It's honoring their passion. This is how children master things. This is how humans master things, is having this incredible focus on what they're loving in the moment. We all have different purposes, and that ebbs and flows throughout our lifetime. And we were not all brought, here or whatever, to learn the same things in life. We're not all meant to. So trusting your child, even if they want to do one thing, like playing Minecraft all day, every day. Now, I know a lot of people might hear that and get nervous, but I can elaborate more of what that can lead to.
Like what? What could that lead to? Because I'm sure that is something that people are like, oh, like video games, oh, what a waste of time.
I know. Well, it helps, I think, to share first that, technology, the internet, gaming, it's all really new historically, like in the history of mankind, it is. In goodness sake, TVs are less than 100 years old, for example, and radios before that, and comic books before that. So back before there were anything but books, parents were told to limit their children's reading for an hour a day, that it will hurt their eyes, it will damage their mind to spend any more time reading, especially things that weren't godly, anything outside of that range. And wow. Parents were afraid. They were told that their child would be severely damaged. You limit it. There's text I've seen written about this. It's incredible. And as well, the next stage of the growth of humanity and technology were radio shows. My grandmother used to tell me stories about them, but they did say, and my grandmother even told me she was not allowed to listen for more than an hour a day, half an hour, actually. I remember her saying half an hour a day. No, everybody was, hey, that was your one listening. Now you have to go. It's going to melt your brain, or whatever. Then TV came. And, things have shifted a lot, I think, thankfully, with different devices where you don't have to watch commercials. But when the commercials and ads came on, for a long period of time, a lot of parents had a really hard time with that. And at the time, I would use that as a tool to educate my child. Like, do you really think that would work if we bought that? And teaching them critical thinking. But the same is true right now, and it's at its absolute peak in humanity of the fear of screen time. And I don't like calling it screen time. I think it's really disrespectful to what your children are choosing to do with their time. It's the same thing as calling, if they were reading a book, or if you were reading a book, it's paper time. You wouldn't even be honoring what the content was or what you liked about it. No, it's just paper time. Was my child too much paper time? It's just really vague and disrespectful. So I know that people don't mean that, but words, we need to come away from like disrespectful language of kind of just saying anything they're doing is that, because there's so much more that our children use these tools for. And so, yeah, there's such a shift happening, and I want to help people understand that it's not the technology that's damaging. It's the control surrounding the technology that's damaging to the relationship and to the child.
So you think left to their own devices that the child will find their own balance, meaning if they're on a screen for too long, that perhaps they'll get internal messaging that says, all right, I need to go outside and play in the bush because I need to balance out. That would be an innate message, because I think the fear would be that they would kind of get sucked in almost in an addictive way, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that the intention of use is an important thing to look at too. There's two people can be doing the same thing, but the intention of the use and what it's being used for is very different with different outcomes. The example of somebody gave the comparison to me once, the analogy of like, a knife in the hands of a chef, it's being used for one thing, and in the hands of a dangerous serial killer or whatever, it's being used for something else, but it's not about the knife. I know it's funny. Extreme, but it's not about the knife, it's about the intention of use, and technology is much the same. I remember when I was a little girl, I loved the show Brady Bunch. For some reason I loved it.
I loved it.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. I
loved it. Yeah, and I remember, it's interesting because I remember the feeling of coming home from school, throwing my book bag down, throwing the TV on, and just laying down and going, finally I can do something I want to do. Man, did that serve as a wonderful decompression for me. I probably would have watched it a lot more if we had some recording device, but between 3 and 4, that was it. That's all you got. But,
yeah.
I remember using it for decompression. I didn't really use technology for learning back then because it wasn't like that. But it's different for our kids. There's so many amazing forms of learning. And I love that parents are doing their research. And I think your audience, I'm sure, are very evolved and educated about a lot to do with parenting and birth and all of these things. But I encourage you've done probably plenty of research on the dangers of screen time and these other things. And I really invite you to give yourself true informed consent by now doing Google searches and reading and researching and books about the benefits of, because fear is like a really damaging motivator when it comes to parenting. So I'd like to help parents step away from fear, because if you're afraid, whenever we're afraid, guys, we want to control. We want to control. And so it's just a natural impulse, but control warps the relationship that your child has with whatever's being controlled. It does. Any human, it does. So what happens when we tell our children that you can only be on an hour a day, for example, and they're, especially kids born, right now in this day and age, aware so many of what freedom means and what injustice is. They feel it stronger than we ever did. And so when we're telling them that they don't have free will, their desire for free will and freedom will override their desire, like the true intention of what they're using it for. And so then it becomes, this thing represents freedom. And they are going to do nothing but that to feel free. So then it's like this warped relationship. Then a child just wants to do nothing but that. But it's not even about what's caused this unnatural relationship is the control and the fear and the limiting. But it's this awful self-fulfilled prophecy that happens because parents then get upset with their children and they blame the technology instead of seeing it's them, the control and the fear. It's a hard thing to wake people up to, but once you see it, I mean, you can be more free to see the damage that control does. There is no damage that technology could do that is anywhere near as close to the damage that you cause to your relationship with your child in a fearful place, controlling, forbidding, not listening to them and getting all upset. That's way, way more damaging than what technology could do. So it's sometimes a lot for people to really understand. And if you don't agree with me and you have different beliefs, if somebody's watching, that's okay. I honor wherever you are in this journey because I know everybody has different values and desires, and some families don't want a TV and they don't want this, and that's okay. But I'm saying if this is something part of your life and your child desires this, how to have more peace and balance is to give freedom and to be involved and to talk about your feelings about it. If your child's been on a long time and you're feeling nervous and stressed about it, instead of letting the fear make you angry and saying, you got one more hour, or 10 more minutes, and then you're off. Letting your child know, like, I'm feeling like you've been on for like 4 hours and I'm starting to stress a little bit. I'm starting to worry. How do you feel? Are your eyes okay? Like, move your legs, sweetie. I want to go outside for a walk and stretch. I know if I'm sitting here for a long time and on, like, my body starts to hurt. And, I showed my son Orion a documentary about sitting, the dangers of sitting too long, but not in a fear-based place. He wanted to know because we talked about it. Yeah. And it was about offices and how long people sit in offices, and how that is damaging their circulation and stuff, and what people are doing about it. They have the standing desks, the walking desks. There's so many wonderful alternatives. And introducing that to him was really powerful. He said, oh, wow, like I didn't know that happened, when you sat for so long. So children want to do what's healthy for themselves. They do, and what's best for themselves. They don't want to be getting themselves out of balance. It's just when their freedom is on the line, I mean, they're going to do things they normally wouldn't, all for the sake of being free.
So when I was asking you about, say, the 15-year-old and their unschooling day, which, like I said, I'm sure is just a regular day, but is that they're just out pursuing their own interests and doing, they've structured their day in the way that they want to.
Yeah, and every 15-year-old's different. It's funny, my daughter Ivy is 15 and she wants to be a veterinarian. Like, she's wanted to do this for probably almost a year now. And she never did a workbook page in her life, never cracked open, any kind of workbook, never a curriculum, never anything schooly. But she's always loved learning. And one thing you said earlier is that when children want to learn something, like with the Sudbury model, they learn it easily because it's time and their brains are fully ready. I've heard that same study about 17-year-olds and learning an entire, school career of math in a matter of 2 months. And it's funny because it's very true. Like, my daughter Ivy, like, she told me, now I don't want anyone to compare. Like, I'm not saying like, here is the wonderful product of unschooling, because Ivy is just really academic. She loves learning. She takes classes online constantly. She tells everybody in the house, I'm studying for 4 hours. I don't want anyone to bug me until, this time. And everybody respects it, but she signed herself up for college courses. She just told me, she's like, I signed up for a couple college courses. And just so you know, I need some time. Like, you did? Do you need help? It was just so funny. Like, I'll never forget it. I'm like, you did? She's like, yeah. I'm doing actually a Harvard extension course. I'm like, what? Do you need me to do anything to help you with that? It was just this face. She's like, no, I got it. I'll let you know. And but I did. We got all kinds of stuff for her for these classes. But my point in saying that is, it's her internal motivation. She really wants to be a veterinarian. She runs a small animal rescue. I mean, this is her passion. Mm-hmm. So kids, they joyfully and willingly find out what needs to be done to get them there, and they take full responsibility of it and do it. And it's true. They truly, truly do. And, instead of forcing a child for 12 years to do a curriculum and do all these things, even at home, all these things that they think they should be doing and learning. And you're doing it against their will. People just get, kids get a real distaste for learning. It's not learning that they don't like, it's forced learning, but it's hard to differentiate. And, and they kind of, children learn when they're internally motivated with their own life's purpose. And it's your job to facilitate it the best you can and offer more that you can. And every child's different. So that's just an example. One thing we're running into, though, which is really interesting, is none of these. So there's a number of series of steps to become a veterinarian. The first one is to become like a vet tech. They will not let her take any college courses at that level until she's 17, and she's only 15. So it's like, what do we do for this? Is the ageism, is kind of a thing. She's ready. She's more motivated than probably most 17-year-olds ready to do it. So I'm in the process going, okay, like, how can I help her with this? Because I don't think Ivy might be one of the only ones right now that are in this zone, but there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of 15-year-olds eventually wanting to do these kind of things, and they're not being held back. They're not being dumbed down. So yes, times are changing. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. My daughter Tiffany has never been into anything like particularly academic, but I facilitate her learning and take it just as seriously with what she wants to do with her time as I do Ivy's. I don't value Ivy doing these wonderful college courses, on chemistry and biology anymore than my daughter Tiffany, who is exploring and reaching out for opportunities that she has here in Miami for modeling and growing her influencer job, and what she's doing with her Instagram. And she's loves her career and she makes really good money at it, and she's so happy and fulfilled. So I want to honor that her here just as much as I do Ivy, saying I love her. I want my kids to be happy. I don't have any attachment as to me feeling like a good mom, according to what my kids do. My kids, no, I honor them. I feel like a good mom because I celebrate it all equally. I don't value one thing over the other.
Well, you really have to have a certain kind of faith, right? Like a faith in even the principle of life, that each being, if not damaged or traumatized to the place of being dissociated or so cut off from who they really are, is going to follow their own path of growth and the things that are best for them. And I always felt as a parent that that was my primary job, is to create space, essentially give a wide berth, right? Like create space for my child to explore the things that they're good at and then facilitate that as much as I can, right? To encourage and support that as much as I can. And this trust that if I do that, he will naturally find the things that he's good at or that he loves or his place in the world. And it's, again, another beautiful parallel with the process of birth itself. You either have that trust that the body knows, that our millions, eons of years of DNA know what to do, or you don't, and you feel like an outside heavy hand must interfere in that process, which essentially is what the current model of public education is a very heavy outside hand applying an arbitrary set of guidelines for everybody rather than looking at the individual. And like I said, this deeper theme in me that are in my mind of having faith in the process of life, that if we can listen to that innate voice, we will be guided. They will be guided.
Yeah, so beautifully said. I think that the time is coming right now where people are starting to value things that we maybe haven't valued before in our culture. I had a coaching call recently, and the mom said that she felt kind of insecure and like she wasn't doing enough when she'd see her friends posting pictures of their kids in school, first day of school, and a picture that they did, a graded workbook page that they did. And she said, I just feel like my child's doing what she wants all day, playing Play-Doh and doing different things, but I feel like I'm not doing enough. And that is a really, really common thing to feel. But what I love to do is to wake people up to realize that if those children in these pictures had freedom and, their own desire and their own needs met, they more than likely wouldn't have even wanted to do the things that the parents are like putting on in pictures and bragging about. They would want to be doing something that meant something to them with their time. And so it's a really, social media is funny, isn't it? Because we can see people doing things and we're just like, oh, wow, that's nice. I should be doing that. I feel guilty. I'm not doing that. But if you were to really get down to the reality and the truth behind all of this, most of the children in these scenarios would not want to be doing what they're being told to do, and that they're punished if they don't do it. And here's the result of, my child having no choice, but to do that. And I said, what I'd love to encourage you to do is, if you're feeling like you want to post something about your child, for example, post a picture of them curled up in a blanket on the couch, like you said she does, and saying, I love so much that my child has the freedom to do what they want with their time. And I love so much the relationship that we have, this connection. I love that my daughter can tell me anything. And I love that we have all this freedom and time together, because it's when we reprioritize what parenting is and we reprioritize the needs of our child, that's when real change happens. And this mother's like, I never thought of doing that. I said, yeah, like, what are your values? It's nothing to do. It's really important to move away from the egoic, like these things that we do to show we're good mothers, we're good fathers, and I think that's our insecurity. And so people just kind of do these humble brags and stuff like that, and because they want people to think they're good parents. Well, when you take that out of the equation, I believe you're a good parent when you respect your child as much as you respect yourself, and that you honor their needs and how they want to spend their time. To me, that is what I would want to be, known for, as far as respecting. And a big thing that I want to share with everybody, I know we're coming to an end here, but this is a really big thought that I had a long time ago, and I've always kept it with me, that most people care more about what strangers think of them than what their own children think of them. And so it's time to, grow that strength, to surround yourself with people that have different values when it comes to parenting. Care more about what your kids think than what strangers think, and your life will change forever. Like, it just will. Your relationship will be so strong. You'll be one of the greatest influences in your child's life when you have that connection, and they're not afraid of you. They're not afraid you're going to take a freedom away. They're not afraid you're going to punish them. They're going to learn so much as a side effect of you honoring and supporting what they're doing and being involved, being involved in their lives. Because rules and punishments are a replacement for being present with children. And when you're present with children, you don't need rules, and punishments don't work anyway. So, yeah.
So it's more of a symbiotic relationship rather than a hierarchical relationship.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's talk about, if you've got people who are currently in the regular school system and for whatever reason they might be considering pulling out of it. So I think the term that I've heard before would be like deschooling, right? To pull people out and then help to migrate them into more of an unschooling existence, which is like a deprogramming or even like a detoxing in some way. So can you describe this process and what you would suggest for people who are interested in doing this?
Sure. Yeah. There's kind of like a rough guideline of deschooling, and I don't know who came up with it actually, and I don't know how accurate it really is, but it's just kind of like this guide that your child should, and you should deschool for a process of a month for every year that they've been in school or controlled. So what this means is allowing your children, don't feel like you have to do anything formal or anything, structured at all. Allow them to do whatever they want with their time for as long as they need to heal. So this is detoxing, and it's deconditioning. This is healing, because you can't see the damage doesn't mean it's not there. I mean, and your audience knows this so well, because our kids are damaged in the system. And to heal, they need freedom, and they need to be respected, and they need support, and they need to be loved without judgment. So the first step of deschooling is to allow your child, just leave them alone and let them do what they want with their time to heal. And that looks different for everybody. And so as far as the parent goes, parents have a much harder time deschooling, because kids want to. They've been wanting this since they were toddlers. They don't want to be controlled. They finally can have that. But parents, the deconditioning and the brainwashing, the undoing of all of that. Second. The process of deschooling for the parent, it varies, but it's unbrainwashing yourself of seeing things in schooly terms, and valuing these things that you've been brainwashed to think are the most important things in life. And that takes time. So go on vacation in your own home. I mean, everybody knows how to do this with a pandemic. You guys have probably deschooled a lot.
Good practice. Lots of good practice.
This is basically that's what it is. And except you don't have to stay at home. You can go anywhere you want. But that's deschooling.
What would you say to parents who are busy with work and other commitments? And what about, school in a lot of ways has become a big daycare for people, right? Like, we have full-time jobs, we're away during the day, it's a very convenient place to park your children. And so, and this was one of the reasons schools were actually invented, was to put the kids of factory workers, right? That's what they were there for. So what would you say to those people who would be like, oh, there's no way I could possibly consider this type of lifestyle because I'm so busy? I have, how could I do this?
I know every situation is different for every family, but there are so many people making it work. People are doing, co-ops, they're taking turns, like being with each other's children, people of the same mind, people that understand that children deserve respect, and they're happy to facilitate and share this. So like in Miami, for example, where I live, there's so many families that are starting to do this and sharing the care and the facilitation and the fun in a community. You know, I don't know, I know not everybody is super social, but being part of a community of people that respect children is really important. You know, and if you don't have one in your community, it's time to build one. It's time to have one. Take that yourself, you know, and do it and create it. And so the other alternative too is something, so I lived in New Hampshire until this past year, and New Hampshire on 43 acres of like farmland in the country, there wasn't a lot of other people doing this, but I did connect with some homeschooling teenagers who would come over and be a mother's helper, for example. So I could get work done or I could do different things. You just need to get creative, you know, and also I think that reprioritization is so important. You know, do you need to be, could you do without a few things? You know, do you need 2 cars? Do you need this home? Or do you need what can you let go of so your child can have more of you? And that you can have more of your child. I mean, you know, I can't even believe my son, Devin, is getting married. Like it was like a blink when I took him out of that bassinet and held him and said, I'll never do that to you again. I'm not kidding. And oh my goodness, in the moment, everybody just said to me, you know, if you have him in your bed, you're never going to get him out. He's going to be in college, climbing in your bed if you co-sleep. And oh, if you don't wean him at 6 months, he's going to be nursing his whole life. And like, it's all just such bullshit, you know, it just is. Be present with your children and enjoy it because it goes by so quick, so quick. I would do anything to be back in that space. So I think just letting go, learning how to be present, living in the now is extremely important. Children are told to prepare for the future, prepare for adulthood constantly in the traditional paradigm. It's all constantly. Childhood is about preparing for adulthood. And, you know, like, you know, what if somebody took you and put you in a classroom all day, every day for the next, I don't know, 10 years so you could prepare for retirement? How fulfilling would your life be right now? You know, and so we wouldn't have to be doing all the self-help stuff all the time, you know, like I'm always pursuing like yoga and like what can I do now? I'm raw vegan and always trying to get back to my center and living in the now, because I've been so damaged by fear of the future living my whole childhood. Our kids, they're not going to need it. They're just doing it, you know, so trust your children, allow yourself freedom, and in the same way that no harm's going to be done when you pick up a baby whenever they need you, like we're told, no harm's going to be done, you know, to your children when love and connection is the priority. The other stuff, you know, it just works out.
I love all of that. And to me, it just keeps coming back to these themes of trust and trusting that we have innate instincts and trusting that we can follow them, right? Without having to seek outside guidance and rules and regulations and be reliant on ourselves. So wonderful. I mean, let's just wrap it up with a quote from your book, Raising Rebels. We need to be rebels to raise rebels.
Yes, exactly. So continue learning yourself, you know, as a parent, and growing yourself and showing your kids that learning never ends. It doesn't end because you turn 18 and school is over. We're all meant to grow and learn and expand. It feels really good. So I think one of the best things you can do for your kids is show them that you're always expanding and learning and growing and modeling that for them. And they will never stop learning. Learning is like breathing. It feels good. They love it. What kids don't love is force and coercion, distrust, limits, control, punishments. That's where all the negative comes from. So if you're someone who needs help with that, I offer many different resources to help support you on this journey. I know it's not easy, but just know you're not alone. And if anything I've said really touches your heart and you feel it to be truth, connect with me. I'm so happy to chat.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you offer? Because I know that you do, I believe, one-on-one work as well as classes. So share with people what you can offer them to help them in these places.
Yeah, well, if you go to my website, danamartin.com, you can see different programs that I offer. But I do like an unschooling support program, a lot of local families are in that. I do one-on-one coaching. I have 3 books that I've written that you can check out about, these topics. Let's see. I have tons of videos. I have a YouTube channel. My kids and I have a YouTube channel that we had partnered with Maker Disney. Isn't that crazy? Disney was the first channel that Disney Maker Disney hosted that was about peaceful parenting and unschooling. So if you go see the Sparkling Martins on YouTube, you can see tons of videos just to kind of get a feel for what life is like in everyday life. I might actually expand a little bit on what you asked, like what's a typical day like. We kind of share with that in the videos. But and I run conferences and I do a lot. So I just go to I'm also actually something else kind of new that I wanted to share really quick, because when I first started doing this as an advocate, I was like, I didn't know I'd end up traveling the world speaking about this. I've been to Australia, China, India. I mean, you name it. I've gone and spoken about this in countries even where it's illegal. And I was the only one really speaking about this. I've done it on TV. We were on the Dr. Phil show, filmed by Oprah on Nightline, the show Wife Swap. So my life has been like this incredible whirlwind of, advocacy. And so many more people are coming to this life now in the last year with everything with this, COVID. Hundreds, if not thousands of people contact me or need help and support. So I started a program where if you're feeling a calling to this, you're somebody that already lives this way and you want to start a career as an advocate, I can show you how. It's a 12-month mentoring program where you have me as your mentor for a full year. It's like weekly classes and educating you about how to help other people with all these different resources, being a speaker, traveling, being a parenting coach, like all the different ways, YouTuber, all the different ways in which you can help others and spread this message of rights and respect that children deserve in unschooling. So that's also on my website. But
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me, Kim.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
All right, so you can find Dana at danamartin.com, DAYNAMARTIN. She has a series of programs, including a radical unschooling group coaching, one-on-one coaching for parents, and as I mentioned, a couple of books, Raising Rebels and Radical Unschooling, and just tons of great resources on her site, so check it out. The Sexy Mama Salon is opening soon. This is my ultimate guide to all things holistic pregnancy and ecstatic birth, how to keep your sexy mojo on all the way through the entire process. When people have children, this is one of the ways or the times when they are most likely to divide. And my view is that it actually can bring you closer than ever and make your sex life better than ever. So every detail in this program is rigorously researched, and I give you the most potent and avant-garde information available to have a healthy, blissful, life-changing experience. We cover everything from conscious conception to holistic and healthy fertility, blissful pregnancy, orgasmic birth, postpartum bliss rather than depression, and education choices, as we've come into in this episode, and I go into more detail with it there. So check it out under kimanami.com. Look for Sexy Mama in my Sexual Savant Salons. And there's an amazing free video series I highly recommend that you check out, which is a preview to the salon. Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, subscribe and also leave a review. And send someone else the gift of a healthy libido and an off-the-charts love life by sharing this episode with them. We'll be back next week, and in the meantime, many happy orgasms.